A lone wolf stood by a weathered fence for 5 long years, gazing across the fields as if waiting for someone who would never return. Little did anyone suspect the heart-stopping moment that would unfold the day his owner finally appeared. Douglas Forrester was known in his rural community for 2 things: his quiet resolve and his unwavering love for a wolf named Echo. Echo wasn't just any wolf. He was an orphaned pup that Douglas had rescued after a poaching incident in the dense forests beyond his ranch. Raised alongside Douglas's loyal dogs, Echo formed an extraordinary bond with his human caretaker. Locals whispered about how the wolf would follow Douglas on daily rounds, calmly padding behind him during cold Montana mornings as he fed the livestock. The two were inseparable, forging a kinship few believed possible between a man and a wild creature. And then, one winter, everything changed. Douglas suffered a devastating loss in the family, and financial pressures forced him to sell most of his land. In the midst of this turmoil, fate dealt another blow. Douglas received a job opportunity in a different state that he couldn't afford to turn down. Heartbroken, he left the ranch under the care of an old friend, planning to return for Echo when his circumstances stabilized, but the months of separation stretched into years. During Douglas's absence, Echo often stood near the broken fence at the edge of the property, his striking amber eyes scanning the horizon. Locals described a haunting sight, a wolf refusing to abandon the only home he had known. Seasons came and went, bringing searing summers and brutal winters. Through it all, Echo waited. Rumors spread that the wolf survived on scraps and the occasional hunts in the nearby woods, but he never roamed far. Somehow, he seemed convinced his human companion would return. By the time 5 years had passed, many believed Douglas was gone for good. Neighbors whispered that Echo would wander away and reclaim his wild instincts, but he never did. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, an unfamiliar truck appeared on the gravel road leading to the old ranch. Echo lifted his head, ears pricked in cautious anticipation. Was it Douglas or a stranger? No one could have predicted the staggering turn of events about to unfold. From the moment the unfamiliar truck rumbled down the gravel driveway, Echo's entire posture changed. His ears pivoted forward, his body rigid with alertness. Over the last 5 years, countless vehicles had come and gone: delivery vans, local farmers, distant relatives of the neighbor who owned the adjacent plot of land. Echo had grown wary of them all, never venturing too close. Yet something about this truck's approach set his senses buzzing. The wolf sniffed the crisp autumn air, capturing a faint scent that felt both distant and familiar. Stepping down from the driver's seat was a man in his early 30s, wearing faded jeans and a jacket, too light for the chill settling into the Montana foothills. He wore an uneasy expression, scanning the property as if searching for signs of life. Echo recognized him almost immediately: Kyle, Douglas's old friend who had taken over the ranch's basic upkeep. Over the years, Kyle had tried to gain the wolf's trust. He brought leftover meat scraps, even called Echo's name in the evenings, but Echo, ever loyal, ever guarded, kept his distance. Kyle never forced the issue, respecting the wolf's deeply ingrained connection to Douglas. This time, though, Kyle appeared more unsettled than usual. He paused at the property's edge, eyes flicking toward the sagging barn and the rickety fence. Then he whistled low, a single note that drifted across the open field. Echo stood near a gnarled old tree, tail twitching in hesitation. Usually he'd remain hidden in the tall grass until Kyle left, but for reasons he couldn't comprehend, the wolf inched forward. Maybe it was the faint odor of engine oil and dust that Kyle's truck carried, reminding Echo of the man he once followed on countless errands across the farmland. Or perhaps it was the low tremor in Kyle's whistle, like an unspoken plea. "Echo," Kyle called softly, his voice echoing across the deserted homestead. "I don't know if you can understand me, but I need you to hear this." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded letter. Even from several yards away, Echo's sharp eyes caught the trembling of Kyle's hands. Looking around as though half expecting someone else to appear, Kyle pressed the letter against his chest and began to speak. "Douglas is coming back," he said, voice wavering. "He wrote me, said things finally turned around. He'll be here tomorrow." The mention of Douglas's name sent a visible ripple through Echo. The wolf's tail lowered, and his stance stiffened. It was as if the mere syllables triggered a memory deep within him. 5 years of longing, 5 years of heartbreak rushed to the surface. For a moment, Echo took a tentative step closer, almost bridging the distance between himself and Kyle, but then he retreated, uncertain. Kyle stayed still, letting the wolf decide how close to come. "I know you've been waiting," he continued, voice laced with empathy. "This place never felt the same without him, huh?" The question hung unanswered in the air. Echo simply stared, amber eyes reflecting a haunted mixture of hope and caution. Unable to draw the wolf nearer, Kyle finally sighed and tucked the letter back into his coat. He made his way to the barn, shoulders slumped. A man carrying the weight of a responsibility he never asked for but never refused. He checked the poultry feed, rummaged through the dusty supplies, and gave the property a quick once-over. All the while, Echo watched from a distance, his watchful gaze never straying far. When Kyle left that evening, the wolf followed at a safe distance, as though guarding the perimeter until the roar of the engine faded away. That night was colder than usual. A biting wind swept down from the mountains, rattling the remnants of the once sturdy ranch structures. Echo curled beneath the leaning porch of the abandoned farmhouse, a spot he had long claimed as shelter during storms. He dozed fitfully, images flickering in his mind. A young Echo chasing after Douglas's truck, half playful, half panicked, not realizing that departure would mean separation. He recalled the comforting tone of Douglas's voice, the rough texture of his calloused hands, and the promise the man had whispered the day he left. "I'll be back soon, buddy, I promise." Dawn broke in a wash of pink and orange light. The entire valley glowed as the sun peeked over the ridge. The old fence post, Echo's habitual lookout, beckoned. Shaking off the night's chill, he padded across the patchy grass and resumed his silent vigil. Hours slipped by, the morning sun climbing steadily. Still no sign of Kyle or any vehicle on the old dirt road. Had Kyle's words merely been another disappointment, a false rumor in a chain of unfulfilled hopes? Sometime near midday, the rumble of tires on gravel pierced the stillness. Echo stood, ears trained on the approaching sound. This wasn't Kyle's truck. It was bigger, the engine's growl deeper. The vehicle came into view, a large, dark-colored pickup crawling up the driveway. The windows were tinted, concealing the driver's face. Every muscle in Echo's body tensed, adrenaline coursing through him. Was it Douglas at last? Or would this be another stranger who promised nothing but heartbreak? The truck stopped near the porch, engine idling. In that moment, Echo's heart, if a wolf can be said to have such an emotional center, seemed to pound with feverish hope. The door opened slowly. A pair of boots hit the ground. They were scuffed and worn, the kind a man might wear when he's known hard labor. Echo's breath caught in his throat. 5 long years had led to this instant. Had the wait truly ended? Or was this just another twist in an unending cycle of waiting? The driver's door eased open with a soft creak, and an arm emerged, tanned, wiry, and clad in a faded flannel shirt rolled to the elbows. Echo held his breath, every instinct demanding he either flee or rush forward. Just as the man stepped into full view, the truck's passenger door opened too, spilling out another figure into the autumn sunlight. Confusion rippled through Echo. The first man to appear was undeniably Douglas. His hair showed a touch more gray at the temples, and time had carved new lines around his eyes. But the posture, tall and quietly confident, was unmistakable. Echo recognized that silhouette in an instant. The second person was a stranger, possibly a woman, though it was hard to see from Echo's angle. She had long dark hair pulled into a loose braid and wore boots almost identical to Douglas's. Could the presence of someone new mean that Echo's entire world was about to change once again? Douglas hesitated beside the truck, his gaze sweeping across the rundown farmhouse. His eyes drank in the memory of everything he'd left behind. The leaning barn, the fields where he and Echo once played, the battered fence posts that had always needed mending but never quite got fixed. There was a sudden shift in his expression, something bittersweet, like relief tinged with regret. Echo took a slow step forward, his powerful muscles coiled. 5 years had taught him caution, but a spark of recognition burned in his chest. He couldn't deny the truth. This was the man he had been waiting for all along. Another step. The crisp leaves scattered as the wolf placed one paw in front of the other. Douglas froze, noticing the movement. Slowly, he raised a hand, as if in greeting or apology. "Echo," Douglas whispered, voice cracking. He sounded disbelieving, like someone witnessing a long-forgotten dream come to life. Echo's ears flicked at the sound of his name spoken by that familiar voice. Then the stranger, the woman with Douglas, drew closer. Concern etched her features. "Is it safe?" she asked softly, glancing uncertainly at Douglas. Her apprehension was natural. Seeing a full-grown wolf poised at the edge of a farmhouse yard would unnerve anyone. But Douglas merely lifted a calming hand, cautioning her to stay back for the moment. "It's okay," he said gently, stepping forward alone. He'd always believed that trust had to be earned, especially with a creature as independent and proud as Echo. When he left 5 years ago, he feared that bond might be broken beyond repair. Yet here he was, stepping through the tall grass, closing the distance with measured steps. Echo stood transfixed. The world around him seemed to fade. No sound of rustling leaves, no birdsong, no distant hum of the truck's engine. All he could feel was the thunder of his own heartbeat. This was the moment he'd guarded for half a decade, fueled by hope that defied reason. Now, the reality of it felt as fragile as a dream. Douglas came to a halt just a few strides away, close enough for Echo to catch his scent. A mixture of gasoline, old leather, and that faint trace of soap he always used. Tears glistened in Douglas's eyes, though he made no move to wipe them away. He extended his hand, palm facing up in a gesture as old as their friendship. In the early days, it was how he'd earned Echo's trust, offering his hand to show he meant no harm. For what felt like an eternity, the wolf stood still, nose twitching. Then, with a tentative step, Echo moved closer. He lowered his muzzle and sniffed Douglas's outstretched fingers. A faint whine escaped Echo's throat, something between a question and a plea. Douglas responded by softly murmuring, "I'm sorry, buddy, I'm so sorry." Those words seemed to break the final barrier. Echo's tense posture softened, his ears relaxing. In a blink, the wolf did something he hadn't done since he was a pup. He pressed his head gently against Douglas's leg, letting out a quiet, trembling breath. It was a moment of forgiveness, relief, and indescribable tenderness. The woman in the background let out a small gasp, her own eyes filling with tears she hadn't expected. She watched in awe as this wild creature, rumored to be untamable, welcomed Douglas back like a long-lost family member. But the reunion didn't come without complications. Echo's life had revolved around a static routine for so long, surviving day by day, awaiting a return that no one else believed in. Now, everything was changing again. Was Douglas here to stay? Or would he vanish once more, leaving Echo behind in the shifting shadows of another broken promise? Douglas gently scratched the fur around Echo's ears, his voice growing stronger. "I never meant for it to be this long," he said, guilt evident in the tremor of his tone. "I tried to come back sooner, but—" His words faded, as though unsure how to explain the weight of 5 missing years. Meanwhile, Echo only pushed closer, as if trying to absorb every syllable. Suddenly, the woman approached, albeit slowly. She knelt, maintaining a respectful distance, and extended her hand as Douglas had done. Echo turned his head, studying her with a mix of curiosity and caution. A part of him sensed that if Douglas trusted her, perhaps he could too. Tentatively, Echo sniffed her fingertips, her eyes lit up with a blend of awe and reverence for this powerful creature. "My name's Hannah," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion. "Douglas talked about you. I didn't quite believe it until now." Their delicate introduction was interrupted by the growl of another engine in the distance. Everyone tensed. Echo raised his head, ears pricked in alarm. Down the road came a battered sedan, dust kicking up in its wake. Kyle was behind the wheel, but he wasn't alone. 3 other figures crowded the back seat, and from the grim expression etched into Kyle's features, this wasn't a friendly visit. Douglas stepped protectively in front of Echo and Hannah, a new tension coursing through him. Who were these newcomers, and why had they chosen this very moment, the first minutes of an emotional homecoming, to arrive unannounced? Echo let out a low, uncertain rumble, sensing the tension rolling off Douglas. Another wave of questions loomed on the horizon. Would this unexpected arrival threaten Echo's long-awaited reunion? Or was there an even larger destiny unfolding, a test of loyalty, love, and the unbreakable bond between man and wolf? Kyle's battered sedan came to a shuddering halt, kicking up a cloud of dust that hung ominously in the crisp autumn air. Before the vehicle had fully stopped, the back doors swung open. 3 figures stepped out, each dressed as though they'd spent days on the road. Jeans caked with grime, jackets frayed at the seams, eyes scanning the homestead with cold intent. Echo's ears flattened against his skull, a low, tense growl rumbling in his chest. He sensed the apprehension rolling off Douglas, whose shoulders squared defensively. "Kyle," Douglas began, forcing a polite nod toward his old friend. "What's going on? Who are these people?" Kyle shot a glance at Echo and then at Hannah, clearly uneasy. "Listen, Doug, I'm sorry. They turned up at my place looking for you," he said in a shaky voice. "I didn't know you'd be here already, but they insisted on coming. Said it was important." The tallest of the 3 strangers, a man with a wiry build and sunken cheeks, stepped forward, crossing his arms over his chest. His gaze flicked dismissively over Douglas before settling on the wolf behind him. "So," he drawled, "this is the famous ranch, and that must be the wolf I've heard so much about." Hannah instinctively placed a hand on Echo's back, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to calm, herself or the wolf. Meanwhile, Douglas studied the stranger, noticing the weariness in his stance and the tension brimming just beneath the surface. Something about this man, perhaps the hardened set of his jaw, signaled he was here on a mission. "Name's Ryan," the man continued. "I represent a group that's interested in purchasing old properties around these parts. Heard you once owned this land or what's left of it." A flicker of recognition sparked in Douglas's eyes. He had fielded countless real estate offers in the past, mostly from companies looking to develop the scenic farmland or turn it into a hunting preserve. But the threat of a hunting preserve, especially near Echo's territory, was the last thing he wanted to consider. "I'm not looking to sell," Douglas said tersely. Ryan exhaled, as though disappointed. "Didn't come all this way to haggle over property lines. I know there's legal entanglements, debts to be settled." His lips curled in a half-smirk. "You left a lot of unfinished business behind, Forrester." The mention of debts struck a chord. A shadow passed across Douglas's face. Hannah saw the guilt there, the weight of secrets he hadn't fully explained, even to her. "This place belongs to me," Douglas replied firmly, though a faint tremor in his voice betrayed the uncertainty that gnawed at him. "I'll handle whatever debts remain. Doesn't give you the right to show up unannounced." Ryan's eyes narrowed. "Not just debts," he said, pulling a folder from inside his jacket. "Liabilities. Wolves aren't exactly popular in some circles around here. Ranchers in the next county have been complaining of livestock losses for years. The rumor is you let a wild wolf roam freely. That doesn't sit well with local officials." Echo, as if sensing he was the topic of conversation, bared his teeth ever so slightly. Hannah ran her hand over his fur, a silent plea for calm. Tension crackled, each side quietly assessing the other. At that moment, one of Ryan's companions, a woman with streaked blonde hair, stepped forward, brandishing a camera. "Saw the wolf just now," she stated in a businesslike tone. "It's huge, bigger than anything we have in our records for this area. If it's been here all these years, someone's bound to have complaints, especially if the land changes hands." Douglas shot Kyle a look, and the neighbor shrugged helplessly. "They cornered me, Doug," Kyle muttered under his breath. "Told me they could help with your financial troubles if we convinced you to sell." Hannah's eyes flashed with anger. "This is a family place," she protested, voice echoing across the yard. "You can't just swoop in and threaten to buy it out from under him." Ryan's gaze flicked from Hannah to Douglas, then back to Echo. "Got a better idea?" he challenged. "Your man here owes more than just a mortgage. The cost of upkeep, back taxes, old liens, it adds up fast. Sooner or later, the county clerk's office is going to want a piece of him. If you think I'm the worst threat around, you're mistaken." A swirl of wind ruffled Echo's fur, carrying the scent of tension, anger, and the faint trace of coming rain. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the rustle of brittle leaves skittering across the empty porch. Then, from behind them, Kyle cleared his throat. "Doug," he said softly, I found documents in the old safe. It's bad. Might be more than we can handle alone. Douglas swallowed hard. Hannah squeezed his arm. She'd known about some financial strains, but not the extent of them, and definitely not the possibility that Echo, a wolf who had never harmed a single neighbor, could be in danger because of local fear and politics. A sense of protective rage flared within Douglas. He looked at Ryan with steely determination. "I didn't come back to let you or anyone else run me off," he declared. "My father and his father before him built their lives on this ground. I have a responsibility to my family's memory and to that wolf who's waited half a decade." Ryan cocked his head, seeming mildly impressed by Douglas's resolve. "Fine. Then you'll need to prove you can manage your debts, fast, and that the wolf isn't a menace. If not, local wildlife authorities might step in. Your property could be seized anyway." Something inside Hannah snapped. "You're threatening to have Echo put down," she demanded, voice vibrating with emotion. Echo caught the tension in her tone and let out a low whine, as though aware his very existence hung in the balance. Ryan shook his head with a forced air of benevolence. "Not if we can avoid it. But accidents happen. If you can't control him, the state might choose a lethal solution. Best case scenario, he ends up tranquilized and relocated to a reserve, far from here." A wave of devastation washed over Douglas. The entire point of returning was to save the only living connection he had left to this ranch, Echo, whose faith hadn't wavered. Now that same loyalty was at risk of being exploited by outside interests with big pockets and no empathy. Hannah's hand slipped into Douglas's, fingers lacing together in silent solidarity. Kyle, looking stricken, glanced between them. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "We need time to sort this out. Maybe we can find a way." The tall, gaunt figure of Ryan snorted, turning back to the car. "You've got until the county reviews your file," he said over his shoulder. "After that, I can't make any promises." His companions followed, the blonde woman snapping one last photo of Echo before climbing into the sedan. With a final slam of the car doors, they were gone, leaving only dust swirling in the wake of their retreat. Douglas sank to one knee, resting a hand on Echo's shoulder. "I promised I'd come back for you," he whispered hoarsely, "and I won't let them take this place or take you away." Echo pressed closer, as though offering silent reassurance. For 5 years, he had waited. Now it seemed they'd both be fighting against time and powerful forces to safeguard the life they once knew, and the future they were determined to forge. A somber hush settled over the property the moment Ryan's car disappeared around the bend. The only sounds were the rustling autumn leaves and Echo's soft breathing. Hannah instinctively reached for Douglas's hand, trying to ground him. She could feel the tension radiating through his body, an undercurrent of frustration, fear, and anger. Echo remained close to Douglas's side, glancing between him and Hannah as though searching for reassurance that everything would be okay. Kyle stood a few paces away, his gaze downcast. At length, he cleared his throat. "Doug," he said, voice wavering. "I'm sorry I brought him here. They cornered me about your debts, acted like it was a done deal. I didn't realize they'd resort to threats." Douglas let out a heavy sigh. "We'll figure something out," he said quietly, though his weary eyes betrayed how overwhelmed he felt. He turned his attention to Hannah. "I never told you the full extent of the financial trouble," he admitted, guilt staining his voice. "I was too embarrassed, couldn't face the idea that this place, my legacy, might slip through my fingers." Hannah softened her expression and squeezed his hand. "We're in this together," she murmured. "Tell me what needs doing." Kyle stepped closer, removing a creased envelope from his jacket pocket. "These are some of the documents," he explained. "Back taxes, old liens, unpaid utility bills. The ranch had more debt than we realized when we took it over for you. You were gone, and I did what I could, but I couldn't cover it all." Douglas accepted the envelope with a trembling hand. "I appreciate everything you did," he said gravely. "I know you tried. Now it's on me to fix it." Carefully, he tucked the papers under his arm. Echo took a tentative step forward, pressing his muzzle against Douglas's leg as if to say he was there, too. The wolf's eyes shone with quiet loyalty. Hannah reached down to gently brush her hand over Echo's fur, trying to mask her own anxiety with a calm demeanor. Kyle looked at the old house, its windows boarded in places and the paint peeling away. "I can help clean up," he offered. "We can't change the debt overnight, but maybe if the place doesn't look so run down, you'll have a better chance of renegotiating with the county. Show them you're serious about rebuilding the ranch." Douglas nodded, feeling a spark of hope. "Every little bit helps," he agreed. "But it's not just the money. Ryan and his people are gunning for Echo. We need to prove he's not a danger." At the mention of Echo's safety, Hannah squared her shoulders. "We can compile testimonies," she suggested. "Neighbors who've seen Echo around, anyone who can vouch he hasn't attacked livestock or caused problems. If we show he's harmless, it'll be harder for authorities to justify removing him." Kyle considered this. "I know a few folks who'll speak up for you," he said. "Not everyone's had trouble with wolves, and a lot of people around here liked you, Doug. Even if you've been gone, they remember how you and Echo helped track down a lost calf once, or how you chased poachers off the land." Douglas mustered a half smile on recalling those days. "Echo always had an instinct for protecting what's ours," he murmured, glancing down at the wolf's intense eyes. Then, more resolutely, "Let's do it. Testimonials, photos, whatever we need." Hannah exhaled, nodding in agreement. "We should move fast. Ryan gave us no timeline, but I'm guessing the county's records might be reviewed soon." They lingered a moment, all sharing an unspoken pledge to fight tooth and nail for this land and for Echo. The tension didn't vanish, but a semblance of determination took its place. Finally, Kyle spoke. "I'll grab some tools from the barn. Let's at least fix that porch before the evening chill sets in." As Kyle headed off, Hannah and Douglas ushered Echo into the farmhouse. The interior was a time capsule of Douglas's past, faded family photos on the walls, worn furniture draped with dust covers. Echo sniffed around, clearly recalling scents from years ago. Hannah set her jacket on a rickety chair and turned to Douglas. "We'll make it livable again," she promised, arms crossed as if bracing for the work ahead. "I'll start clearing out the kitchen. Maybe I can find a working stove." Before Douglas could respond, Echo let out a small whine at the back door. He pawed at the chipped paint, his body language suggesting unease. Douglas walked over and opened it, letting Echo step onto the creaking porch that overlooked the fields. The wolf tilted his nose upward, as though sampling the breeze for signs of trouble. "I feel it too, buddy," Douglas murmured. "It's not safe yet." Minutes later, the sound of hammering echoed from the front porch. Kyle, beginning repairs. Hannah rummaged in the kitchen, finding a dusty broom and an old pot she could fill with water from the outdoor pump. The day passed in a blur of activity. Boards hammered into place, cobwebs swept from corners, floors scrubbed enough to reveal a glimmer of the original wood. Echo periodically wandered between each of them, as if checking on their progress. Exhaustion weighed heavily by late afternoon, but the house already looked less like an abandoned ruin. A semblance of life was returning. With Kyle's help, Douglas discovered old receipts and financial statements in a desk drawer, each item painting a clearer picture of what he owed. The sum was sizable, but not insurmountable, if he found the right solution soon. When the sun dipped low, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges, the group reconvened in the living room. The space was sparse, just an old couch and two mismatched chairs they'd dusted off. Hannah lit a lantern to chase away the gathering gloom. Echo settled on the floor, tail curled around his paws, as if he sensed this conversation was important. "Tomorrow," Douglas began, running a hand through his hair, "I'll head into town to meet with the county clerk. I want to see the paperwork myself and find out if they're really close to seizing the land." Kyle nodded. "I'll keep working here, maybe talk to a few neighbors, try to line up those testimonials about Echo." Hannah placed a supportive hand on Douglas's arm. "And I'll handle the phone calls, see if any old friends or local vets can speak on Echo's behalf. The more evidence we have of him being a gentle creature, the better." In the lantern's warm glow, the farmhouse no longer felt forsaken. It felt like the cradle of a new beginning, fortified by loyalty, both human and lupine. A quiet resolve passed among them, reaffirming that no matter what threats loomed, they would stand firm. Finally, Echo let out a soft huff, as if he, too, approved the plan. It had been a day of revelations and scrambling to adjust. But as night descended, each of them believed, even if just a little, that they might preserve the bond that had sustained Echo for so long and save the ranch that had defined Douglas's life. Morning light filtered through the threadbare curtains, illuminating the old farmhouse with a promise of new beginnings and new troubles. Douglas awoke on the faded couch, stiff from the previous day's grueling work. Echo lay curled at the far side of the living room, ears perking up as soon as Douglas stirred. The wolf rose, stretching in a low, graceful arc before padding quietly toward the door. Hannah, already dressed, was sipping from a chipped mug by the window. "I found a half bag of coffee in the kitchen," she said with a faint smile. "Might be old, but it's better than nothing." He chuckled, accepting the mug gratefully. "We'll need any boost we can get." Sipping the lukewarm brew, he allowed himself a moment of calm before the day's challenges came rushing back. Outside, Kyle was already at work, repairing a section of the fence near the barn. The distant clang of metal on wood echoed across the yard. Echo trotted out onto the porch, tail swishing, as though inspecting the property lines for threats. Despite the tranquil morning, a subtle current of unease coursed through everyone, the lingering memory of Ryan's warnings and the relentless ticking of the clock against Douglas's debts. Later that morning, Douglas drove into town. Dust spiraled behind his old truck as he navigated winding roads lined by fields of tall grass, turning gold in the autumn sun. His first stop was the county clerk's office, a modest building with peeling paint on its wooden facade. Inside, a stern-faced clerk gave him a stack of papers to review in the cramped waiting area. Each page confirmed that his debts were dangerously close to triggering a formal seizure of the property. While Douglas pored over the numbers, a familiar voice pulled his attention away. Standing by the front desk was Warren Metzger, a rancher from the next county over. Warren had a reputation for breeding guard dogs and for his staunch opposition to any wolf presence near farmland. He believed wolves spelled trouble for livestock, and he was vocal about it at every town hall meeting. Spotting Douglas, Warren ambled over, dipping his wide-brimmed hat in a half-hearted greeting. "Heard you were back," he said gruffly. His gaze flicked to the thick folder of debt documents. "Rumors flying that your place is in bad shape." Douglas, bracing for a snide remark, merely nodded. "We'll manage," he said, voice guarded. Warren pursed his lips. "I'm no friend of wolves," he stated bluntly, eyes narrowing. "But I don't like the idea of outsiders snatching up land around here, especially if they plan to build a hunting preserve. My family's been on our ranch for 4 generations. We value tradition. So here's the deal. I buy your livestock from you, what's left of it, at a fair price. You get a quick influx of cash, and maybe it helps keep the county off your back." Douglas stiffened. He had almost no livestock left, merely a handful of aging chickens and 2 goats Kyle had been tending. But even a small sale might help chip away at those debts. Yet he couldn't forget Warren's anti-wolf stance. "Would this arrangement come with conditions about Echo?" he asked, testing the waters. Warren snorted. "I don't care what you do with that beast, as long as it stays off my property. Do we have a deal or not?" It wasn't exactly an alliance, but it wasn't a trap either. After a moment's hesitation, Douglas swallowed his pride. "I'll consider it," he said. "Thanks." As Warren turned away, Douglas wondered if there was a chance, however slim, that even staunch wolf opponents might rally around him if it meant blocking big-shot developers and preserving local ownership. Maybe bridging old rivalries was a path forward. Returning to the farmhouse just before noon, Douglas found Hannah outside, making calls on her cell phone. She ended one call abruptly, her expression troubled. Sensing her distress, Echo padded over, pressing his nose against her leg. Hannah smiled faintly but didn't speak right away. Douglas approached with concern. "Everything all right?" She hesitated. "I've been calling local vets, asking if they can verify Echo's health records or confirm he's never been aggressive. Most have good things to say, but one of them brought up a complaint filed a few years back about a wolf chasing a calf near the river." She rubbed the back of her neck, sighing. "They don't know it was Echo, but if the locals suspect it, that complaint could hurt our case." Douglas set down the slim stack of county documents he was carrying. "We need to figure out who filed that complaint. Maybe we can set the record straight." Hannah nodded, glancing away as if weighing another burden on her mind. "Doug, there's something I never told you," she admitted quietly. Back when I was younger, my family ran a small ranch. We had trouble with coyotes, lost half our livestock one season. After that, my father became convinced that any predator was an enemy. She let out a shaky breath. I left home because I couldn't stand the cruelty he showed to the animals. Now I'm afraid he might get word about Echo and join the voices calling for him to be removed. Her admission caught Douglas off guard. He stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Hey, we deal with the problems in front of us, one step at a time. We'll handle whatever comes. Hannah exhaled, tension easing slightly. Thank you, she said softly, eyes showing a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. That afternoon, Kyle directed them to the barn's dusty loft to look for any ranch receipts or documents that might prove Echo had been more help than harm, like vet bills for rescued livestock, or records of stray animals Echo had guided back. While rummaging through old trunks and crates, Hannah discovered a weathered ledger. Inside it were handwritten notes cataloging local ranchers who'd once supported Douglas's father. Several entries mentioned a wolf pup found 20XX, alongside details of how Douglas's father had nursed the animal back to health. The pup wasn't Echo, but it revealed a legacy of wolf conservation that stretched back generations in Douglas's family. This could be important, Hannah murmured. It shows that wolves on this ranch have been part of the tradition for a long time and not a nuisance. Douglas peered over her shoulder, excitement lighting his eyes. Maybe we can use it to argue that the ranch has a historical precedent for caring for wild wolves responsibly. If we find more like this, we can strengthen our case. A wave of cautious optimism settled over them. New paths were emerging, unexpected offers from old rivals, the possibility of forging alliances, hidden family records, and Hannah's own difficult history. Yet each path came with fresh obstacles. As they gathered their findings, Echo prowled the barn's perimeter, ears alert to the rustle of wind through the rafters. The sense of urgency loomed. The clock was ticking, and they had only so long to prove Echo's worthiness and Douglas's ability to protect his ancestral home. In that moment, it felt like the entire ranch breathed anew, energized by determination. Even in the face of multiple challenges, a fragile hope took root. Together, they might turn the tide, if only they could withstand the storms headed their way. Afternoon shadows stretched across the ranch as Douglas, Hannah, and Kyle sifted through the ledger they had uncovered in the barn. Echo lay near the entrance, eyes half-lidded but alert, his keen ears flicking at every creak in the aged wood. Now and then, a gust of wind stirred the dust motes floating in the late-day sun. It was a brief moment of relative calm, a fleeting pause before the next wave of challenges rolled in. A soft chime interrupted the hush, Hannah's phone buzzing. Glancing at the caller ID, she felt her stomach twist. "It's my father," she whispered, her grip on the device tightening. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello." Douglas exchanged a concerned look with Kyle, who discreetly busied himself flipping through ledger pages. Echo lifted his head, sensing Hannah's sudden tension. She walked a few steps away, voice subdued as she attempted to keep the conversation private. "That's wonderful," Hannah murmured, her tone caught between forced politeness and raw unease. "I'm glad you're all right." "Yes, I'm at a ranch." She caught Douglas's eye, then turned her back to him as though shielding a secret. "It belongs to a friend," she added carefully. Douglas tried not to listen, but it was impossible to ignore the tremor in Hannah's voice. He recalled her confession about leaving home because of her father's harsh stance on predators. After a moment, Hannah cleared her throat. "No, Dad. It's not like that. The wolf here isn't a threat. He's practically family." A pause. "No, I won't tell you exactly where I am." Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm sorry you feel that way, but I have to go." She ended the call abruptly, her lips pressed together in a thin line. She turned to find both Douglas and Kyle watching her with sympathy. He heard rumors about a wolf in the area. He made it sound like half the state is on high alert, worried about attacks that probably never even happened, Hannah explained, voice trembling with anger. "Said he might come see for himself, make sure I'm not in danger." She ran a hand through her hair, exhaling shakily. He's the last person I want stirring up trouble right now. Douglas stepped closer, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. We'll handle it, he reassured her. Your father doesn't know the full story about Echo, about this ranch. Maybe if he sees how well-trained and docile Echo is, he'll come around. She offered a small, brittle smile. You don't know my father. He believes any predator is a menace. If he finds out about the land issues, he might side with Ryan or worse. Kyle spoke up softly. There's a lot at stake, but remember, we've got our own evidence. Like that ledger, we can show your dad or anyone else that wolves have been part of this ranch's legacy for decades, in a safe and respectful way. He flipped to a page detailing how Douglas's father once tended an injured wolf. It's not like we're ignoring the realities of living alongside predators, he added. We're managing them responsibly. Hannah's gaze dropped to Echo, who had risen and padded over to her, tail low and wagging slightly in reassurance. She stroked the wolf's head. I hope you're right, she murmured, letting her fingers linger in Echo's thick fur. Just then, the sound of an approaching vehicle ripped through the momentary calm. Douglas's heart lurched, another uninvited guest. But peering out of the barn, they spotted Warren Metzger's truck inching up the driveway. Warren stepped out, lips set in a hard line. He carried a clipboard and wore the same scowl he'd worn earlier in town. I came to get a look at your animals, Warren announced bluntly, tipping his hat. If we're making a deal, I want to be sure there's something worth buying. His gaze slid to Echo, who stood close to Hannah. Long as that wolf stays out of my way. Douglas exchanged a wary glance with Hannah. Despite their reservations, they needed Warren's potential deal. Clearing his throat, Douglas nodded. We only have a few goats and chickens left. Kyle can show you. Fine, Warren agreed, then fixed Douglas with a pointed stare. If we do business, I don't want any of your land, just the livestock. But know this, if that wolf ever crosses onto my property, I'll protect what's mine. Understood. Echo let out a low rumble, sensing the tension in Warren's tone. Hannah laid a reassuring hand on Echo's neck, coaxing him to stay calm. Douglas did his best to keep his voice steady. We understand. And trust me, Echo isn't going anywhere near your place. Warren grunted. We'll see. Show me those goats. As Kyle led him to the small enclosure behind the barn, Hannah exhaled, tension thrumming through her. He's on edge already, she noted softly. If my father shows up while Warren's here, I can't imagine the fireworks. Douglas nodded, running a hand over his jaw. We're caught between angry ranchers, potential new developers, and your father's prejudice. He looked at Echo, who tilted his head questioningly as if waiting for guidance. We can't afford to lose focus now. We've got to prove Echo belongs here, and we need money fast. Selling the few animals we have might buy us time. They waited anxiously as the minutes ticked by. Occasionally they could hear Warren's gruff voice and Kyle's measured replies. After a while, the pair returned. With Warren scanning the ledger that Kyle had shown him, Douglas tried to read Warren's expression, somewhere between grudging respect and lingering unease. All right, Warren said, closing the ledger with a soft thump. I'll buy the goats and chickens. Price is fair enough. He handed Douglas a check from the inside of his jacket. Don't make me regret this, Forrester. Douglas took the slip of paper, relief flooding him at the modest sum, less than he'd hoped, but a step in the right direction. Thank you, he managed, meeting Warren's gaze. I appreciate it. Warren offered a terse nod, then flicked his eyes to Echo one last time. Keep that wolf under control, he muttered, turning on his heel. Or next time, I might not be so generous. As Warren's truck retreated down the driveway, Hannah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. One problem tentatively solved, she said quietly. And how many more to go? Douglas slid an arm around her shoulders, the hint of a weary smile ghosting his lips. We take them one at a time. Echo nudged both of them, as though voicing his agreement. For better or worse, their emotional dilemmas had only just begun. But amid the uncertainty, a thread of solidarity wove them all together, man, woman, and wolf standing firm against the storm. Late afternoon light cast elongated shadows across the farmhouse yard, deepening the sense of unease that had lingered since Warren's departure. Echo, restless, trotted the perimeter of the property, nose lifted to catch scents carried by the wind. Inside, Hannah, Douglas, and Kyle gathered around the battered kitchen table, reviewing the day's meager progress. They had sold the few animals available for a modest sum, made calls to potential supporters, and continued to tidy up the house. But the looming pressure, debts, property threats, and the wolf's uncertain legal status felt heavier with each passing hour. Suddenly, Echo's sharp bark echoed through the yard. Hannah rushed to the window and saw a dusty station wagon pulling up next to the barn. Her heart kicked. "That's my father's car," she said, voice taut. Douglas exchanged a concerned glance with Kyle, then stood and headed for the door, Hannah close behind. The station wagon's engine sputtered to silence. A tall man with graying temples stepped out, scanning the farm with narrowed eyes. Despite his rugged, time-worn appearance, he had a strictness about him, the bearing of someone who had always run his own land with firm conviction, Hannah's father. He spotted them on the porch, hesitated briefly, then walked forward. "Dad," Hannah greeted warily, forcing a polite nod. Her father's gaze flicked from her to Douglas, then to Echo, who stood several yards away, tail raised in cautious vigilance. The older man's jaw tightened at the sight of the wolf. "Been a long time, Hannah," he said, voice deep and measured. "I heard rumors you'd gotten mixed up in some wolf business again. Thought I'd see it for myself." A spark of defiance flashed in Hannah's eyes. "It's not wolf business. This is Echo, Doug's companion. He's never harmed anyone." Her father let out a curt laugh, shifting his attention to Douglas. "And you're the man of the hour, I gather, the one with all these debts. Yet you're insisting on keeping a predator around, one that could cause more trouble than you realize." He cast a suspicious glance at Echo. "My daughter has a history of trusting dangerous animals over good sense." Hannah bristled but kept her tone level. "Dad, that's not fair. I left home because I disagreed with how you handled coyotes. This is different." He fixed her with a stony stare. "Is it?" His eyes swept over the dilapidated farmhouse and the patches of newly replaced boards on the porch. "Looks to me like you're one official notice away from losing this place altogether, and having a wolf on the property sure won't help." Douglas felt a flicker of anger stirring in his chest, but he swallowed it down, mindful of Hannah's feelings. "We're handling the financial side," he said calmly. "The wolf is no threat. If you're here to help, we welcome that. But if you've come to shut us down, you're wasting your time." Hannah's father let out a tired sigh and glanced at his daughter. "I came to protect you," he said, his voice softer but still edged with resistance. "No matter our disagreements, I don't want you stuck in a losing battle, especially one that might end with that wolf put down by the state." Before Hannah could respond, Kyle hurried around the side of the farmhouse, panting from a short sprint. "We've got a situation," he managed between breaths, pulling everyone's attention. "Neighbor's ranch 3 miles down the road. They just found a calf mauled. People are already talking. A couple of locals claim they've seen a big gray wolf roaming near the fields." A chill shot through Hannah, and Echo sensed the panic flaring around them, letting out a low, uneasy whine. Douglas's throat went dry. "They're blaming Echo, aren't they?" Kyle nodded grimly. "Word travels fast here. One of the neighbors phoned me, concerned. Didn't say Echo's name outright, but you know how rumors spread. They'll connect the dots soon enough." Hannah's father set his jaw, an unsettling mix of protectiveness and stubbornness. "I warned you, daughter. Wolves are trouble. If folks think that's the same wolf living on your property, you'll have the entire county after you in no time." "But Echo's been here all day," Hannah insisted, voice laced with urgency. "He never left our sight. We have multiple witnesses, Kyle, Douglas, and me. There's no way he could have wandered off to attack livestock." "That won't matter," Douglas said quietly, dread creeping into his tone. "People who already dislike wolves won't wait for proof. Ryan and his group will use this as ammunition. They'll argue Echo's a ticking time bomb." He glanced over at his beloved wolf, who now pressed closer to Hannah, picking up on her distress. Her father opened his mouth to speak, but Hannah spun toward him, anger finally boiling to the surface. "I know you'd love to say 'I told you so,' Dad, but we need solutions, not 'I told you so.' That calf's death might seal Echo's fate unless we find out who or what really caused it, and fast." A tense beat passed. Then Hannah's father sighed again, a reluctant acceptance flickering across his features. "All right, you want a solution? Then find proof that another animal did this. Coyotes, a feral dog, anything but that wolf. You'll also need people in the area to confirm Echo was here when the calf was killed. Without airtight evidence, he'll be the prime suspect." Stepping forward, Douglas nodded, relief and anxiety mingling. "We can gather statements. I'll talk to the neighbors who saw me working on the porch with Echo right beside me. Kyle can photograph our fence line. No sign of forced entry or a hole big enough for Echo to slip through." "That's a start," Kyle agreed. "And maybe I can head over to the neighbor's ranch to see if the bite marks match a wolf's or something else." Hannah's father regarded them skeptically. "You'll be swimming against the current of public opinion, but if you can prove the wolf's innocent, I'll back off," he said, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Until then, I'm sticking around to make sure my daughter's not caught in the crossfire." Echo watched each speaker in turn, as though sensing this discussion was crucial to his survival. The tension in the yard was palpable, a web of distrust, hope, and desperate determination. Standing at the crossroads, they all knew the stakes had risen dramatically. One dead calf could shatter any goodwill left in the community and tip the scales against Echo forever. A hush fell over the group, the air thick with urgency and unspoken questions. Nightfall was coming fast, and with it, the promise of deepening shadows. Could they piece together enough evidence to clear Echo's name before panic took hold? Or would this tragedy be the final spark igniting a county-wide call to remove the wolf, by any means necessary? Night fell quickly, ushering in a restless darkness that seemed to mirror everyone's anxiety. Lantern light danced across the farmhouse walls as Douglas, Hannah, Kyle, and Hannah's father, Mr. Cole, gathered around the old kitchen table to plan their next move. Echo lay at the threshold, occasionally lifting his head to listen for sounds on the wind. Outside, a crisp breeze rattled the window panes, and the moon cast a pale glow on the fields where he had stood guard so many nights before. The tension in the kitchen was palpable. Mr. Cole alternated between disapproving stares at Echo and sharp glances at Douglas. Hannah perched on the edge of a creaky chair, her shoulders rigid. Kyle tapped a pen against a notepad, the rhythmic click betraying his own nerves. "First order of business," Douglas began, trying to infuse his voice with confidence. "We need evidence that Echo was here at the time of the attack. Kyle and I saw him, but we're hardly impartial witnesses." Hannah nodded. "I made calls earlier to a couple of neighbors, Ms. Foster and Mr. Alvarez. They were driving past around midday and said they saw Echo in the yard. Both might be willing to give statements." Mr. Cole folded his arms. "You're banking on a few neighbors' testimonies against a dead calf. People love a scapegoat. They'll point to the nearest wolf, fair or not." Douglas took a breath, determined not to let the older man's cynicism derail them. "We'll get them to sign formal statements. If we have multiple witnesses, it might slow down any official action." Kyle gave a curt nod. "I'll head out first thing in the morning to talk with Miss Foster and Mr. Alvarez face to face. See if they'll put it in writing." "Good," Hannah said, relieved. Then she looked at her father, wary but resolute. "Dad, you said you'd stick around to protect me, but you can help us protect Echo as well. You have connections in the ranching community. Could you reach out to people who trust you? Ask them to give us a chance to prove Echo's innocence?" His jaw tightened. "I don't support harboring a predator, but if I can keep you safe, I'll see what I can do." The admission was grudging, but it was the closest thing to cooperation they'd heard all evening. A heavy silence filled the farmhouse. The flicker of lantern light cast ominous shadows, reflecting the weight of unspoken tensions. Finally, Douglas cleared his throat. "There's something else. Ryan and his group are looking for any reason to swoop in and force a sale on this property. If Echo's labeled a dangerous nuisance, that gives them leverage with local authorities. They'll claim the ranch is mismanaged and push for seizure. Then the land becomes a hunting preserve, if not worse." Hannah exhaled, rubbing her temple. "So we have to fight two fronts. Clear Echo's name and show the county we can handle our debts." Mr. Cole leaned forward, lacing his fingers. "Let me be clear. I'm not sold on the idea of living alongside a wolf, especially if he's attracting negative attention. But I won't see my daughter lose everything. Not if I can help it. Kyle broke the tension with a forced, half-hearted grin. We'll take all the help we can get. Maybe you can tell your rancher friends that it's a misunderstanding. Emphasize that Echo was never near that neighbor's field. Mr. Cole grunted in acknowledgement, but his gaze remained on Echo. The wolf looked back, eyes reflecting the lantern's glow, a silent standoff of man versus animal. Then Echo turned, ears pricking at some faint sound from outside. He rose to his paws and padded toward the door, whining softly. Hannah stood. He hears something. They followed Echo onto the porch, where the chill night air bit at their skin. The moonlit landscape lay stretched out before them, silent except for the whisper of wind through tall grass. In the distance, a bobbing flashlight beam approached, someone walking the road at an odd hour. Douglas squinted. It could be Ms. Foster. She sometimes checks on her night-grazing sheep, but as the figure drew closer, it became clear this was a stranger, a man in a thick jacket, his face partially hidden by a hood. Spotting the small group on the porch, he paused as though evaluating the situation. Echo let out a warning bark, hackles bristling. That was enough to prompt Mr. Cole to step forward protectively. "Who's there?" he called out sharply. The hooded man slowly raised both hands, a gesture of peace. I'm looking for the Forrester Ranch," he said in a shaky voice. "Am I in the right place?" Douglas felt Echo tense beside him. This was no local resident, and the hour was far too late for a friendly visit. "I'm Douglas Forrester," he replied, keeping his tone polite but firm. "What do you want?" From under the hood, the man's eyes flicked toward Echo. He swallowed hard. "I heard rumors about a wolf living out here. I just came to see if the stories were true." A chill crawled up Hannah's spine. For all the talk of livestock attacks and property threats, she hadn't considered that curiosity seekers might start showing up, or worse, unscrupulous hunters. "Who are you?" she demanded. "What's your reason for coming this late?" The man lowered his flashlight. "Name's Seth. I'm a researcher, wildlife photographer, actually. I caught wind there was a wolf living with a rancher. Thought it might be an amazing story. I'm sorry if this is a bad time," he added, glancing uneasily at Echo, who seemed poised to lunge if given a reason. Douglas's mind raced. A wildlife photographer could help or harm them. Positive coverage might bolster their case, but any misinterpretation could feed local fears. "You should have contacted me first," Douglas said. "Showing up unannounced is a quick way to get hurt, especially around a wolf." Seth nodded, looking contrite. "I didn't mean to spook you. If you'll let me stay the night, I'll be on my way in the morning. I won't bother anyone. Just want a quick look. Maybe a photo or two." Hannah shot Douglas a questioning glance. Mr. Cole shook his head, distrust etched into every line of his face. Kyle shifted uncomfortably. Echo, however, had relaxed a fraction, perhaps sensing no immediate threat from the man. His ears tilted back and forth, reading Seth's posture. After a tense moment, Echo backed up a step, as if granting temporary acceptance. Sensing this subtle shift, Douglas exhaled. "All right," he said cautiously. "We can talk inside. But you need to understand, Echo's under scrutiny right now. One wrong headline or photo could make things worse." "Clear?" Seth nodded, relief coloring his features. "Crystal clear." The group guided him into the farmhouse, Echo following last with measured steps. Another stranger in the mix, another unpredictable element to navigate. As midnight neared, the house felt more crowded with conflicting motives and fragile alliances. The tension only thickened. Echo locked eyes with Douglas, as if to say, "I trust you, but be careful." And with that unspoken warning lingering in the flickering lantern light, they prepared for yet another twist, in a battle that was fast becoming a tangled labyrinth of secrets, suspicion, and the unbreakable bond between a wolf and the people fighting for his survival. A tense hush settled over the farmhouse as the clock's steady tick marked the late night hours. Seth, the wildlife photographer, sat at the edge of an old armchair, still brushing dust off his jacket while he observed the ragtag group around him. Douglas, Hannah, Kyle, and Mr. Cole. Echo lay near the fireplace, watchful but oddly calm, as though sensing this newcomer posed no immediate threat. A single oil lamp cast flickering shadows across the walls, heightening the sense of unease that lingered from the day's events. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the porch, making the aged planks groan. In the quiet that followed, Seth broke the silence. "I didn't mean to barge in so late, but rumors about a tame wolf on a struggling ranch. It caught my professional curiosity." Hannah's father, Mr. Cole, responded with a gruff huff. "Never known a wolf to be tame," he muttered, his skeptical gaze flicked to Echo. "And from what I hear, we're one dead calf away from a county-wide outcry. This is the worst possible time to stir up more attention." Seth looked genuinely contrite. "I get it. If it helps, my goal is to document positive human-wildlife relationships. I'm not here to sensationalize anything. If Echo is as remarkable as I've heard, maybe a respectful article or photo essay could sway public opinion in your favor." Douglas eyed Seth, torn between hope and wariness. "It might be a double-edged sword," he conceded. "But right now we need every advantage. If you keep your coverage factual and careful, showing Echo as he really is, it could help counter the hysteria." Hannah nodded reluctantly. "We'll consider it, but let's be absolutely clear. No posts, no leaks, nothing until we've cleared Echo's name for the calf incident. We can't risk fueling any rumors." Seth raised his hands in surrender. "Understood. I'll stay offline. Keep my camera locked down until you give the green light." With that uneasy arrangement in place, they decided to catch some sleep. Kyle offered Seth a thin blanket and a spot on the living room floor. Mr. Cole insisted on taking the barn loft for the night, less to intrude, more to keep an eye on the property. As the others found places to rest, Hannah and Douglas huddled by the dying embers of the fireplace, exchanging whispered concerns. "Can we really trust Seth?" Hannah asked, voice subdued. Douglas sighed, gaze drifting to Echo. The wolf was dozing lightly, one ear perked. "We don't have many choices. He might be an asset if his intentions are genuine. Besides," he added softly, "better to keep him here than let him wander around on his own. If he stumbles on something that adds fuel to the rumors, we'll never control the narrative." Hannah nodded, though her brows remained furrowed with worry. She reached out to stroke Echo's back, drawing comfort from his steady presence. "We have to protect him," she whispered, the urgency in her tone unmistakable. They rose at dawn to a cacophony of urgent knocks on the front door. Echo sprang to his feet, hackles raised. Douglas and Hannah exchanged alarmed glances. Seth, half awake, fumbled for his camera, and Mr. Cole hurried in from the barn, boots stomping across the porch. "Who is it?" Douglas called, inching the door open. Outside stood Ms. Foster, a short, formidable woman in her 50s, wringing her hands anxiously. Behind her stood a local deputy with a solemn expression. "Douglas," Ms. Foster blurted, her voice shaking. "The county's called for an emergency community meeting. They're reviewing that calf attack and your wolf. Folks are saying Echo's the one who mauled it." Hannah's stomach dropped. They'd hoped to have days to gather testimony, not hours. "When is this meeting?" The deputy removed his hat, looking uncomfortable. "Starts in less than 2 hours at the old Grange Hall. The county commissioners want to hear from both sides." Mr. Cole stepped forward, arms crossed. "Why the rush? Usually these matters take time." The deputy shrugged, clearly caught in the middle. "There's a lot of anger. Ranchers are furious, and with new investors looking to buy up land, well, the commissioners don't want trouble brewing." Douglas's jaw tightened. This was precisely the scenario they'd feared, an expedited hearing where blame might be assigned before evidence could be presented. "We'll be there," he said, voice firm, "and we'll bring proof Echo was here all day. He didn't attack that calf." Mrs. Foster gave a brisk nod, relief flickering across her face. "I'll testify," she promised. "I saw Echo here around midday. I don't believe he's guilty." With that, Ms. Foster and the deputy hurried off, presumably to deliver the same news to the rest of the community. Douglas and Hannah exchanged a grim look. Their timeline had shrunk to mere minutes, not days. Everyone snapped into action. While Hannah phoned Mr. Alvarez and other neighbors who might speak on Echo's behalf, Kyle raced to find the ledger and any written records that documented Echo's peaceful track record. Seth, sensing the gravity of the situation, quietly asked if he could come along with his camera. This meeting could be crucial, he reasoned. A fair documentarian's eye might help, or at least show what really happens. Douglas hesitated, then relented. Fine, but keep your distance. We can't risk fueling drama. Meanwhile, Mr. Cole, still ambivalent about Echo, picked up his truck keys. I'll go talk to the local vet, he announced gruffly. See if he'll confirm Echo's routine checkups. Even a reluctant endorsement might sway the commissioners. With a final flurry of preparations, they piled into vehicles, Douglas, Hannah, and Seth in the old pickup, Kyle following behind in his truck, and Mr. Cole departing on his own. Echo, still at Hannah's side, whined uneasily as though sensing that the very future of this ranch and his own life hung in the balance. But traveling with a wolf to a packed community meeting carried its own risks. Douglas bent down and cradled Echo's face, gazing into those amber eyes. I'm sorry, boy, you have to stay here. We'll fight for you. Echo let out a low, plaintive sound, torn between loyalty and confusion as Douglas climbed into the pickup. The old Grange Hall stood at the edge of town, its parking lot already teeming with trucks and SUVs, farmers in overalls, ranchers in dusty boots, and anxious townspeople milled around, voices hushed yet tense. The commissioners, a small group of officials, sat behind a makeshift table on the raised stage, clearly bracing for a storm of heated opinions. As Douglas, Hannah, and Seth stepped inside, all eyes swiveled their way. Warren Metzger was seated in the front row, arms crossed. Ryan and his associates loitered near the back, whispering among themselves. Hannah swallowed hard, scanning the crowd. She recognized a few friendly faces, including Ms. Foster, but many others wore hardened, suspicious expressions. A stern-faced commissioner stood and tapped the microphone. We're convening this emergency meeting to address the recent livestock attack in the county and the growing concern about a wolf residing on private land. We'll begin with statements from the concerned parties. A sense of finality settled over Douglas. The short time to prepare felt woefully inadequate, yet he saw no choice but to stand firm. With a deep breath, he approached the microphone, heart pounding in his chest. Hannah walked beside him, mustering every ounce of resolve. In the hush that followed, the weight of their mission bore down. Prove Echo's innocence, stave off land-hungry developers, and placate fearful ranchers, some of whom would be all too happy to see a wolf removed by any means necessary. One slip, one poorly chosen word, and the collective anger might tip against them irreversibly. Douglas cleared his throat. Thank you for hearing us. My name is Douglas Forrester, and I'd like to start by saying that my wolf Echo did not kill that calf. We have witnesses, we have evidence, and we're here to present the truth. Across the room, Ryan's lips curled into a thin smile, and Warren narrowed his eyes, arms still locked across his chest. Tension rippled through the crowd, anticipation mounting. In that singular moment, everything teetered on the brink, ready to escalate into the decisive confrontation that would define Echo's fate and the future of the Forrester Ranch. All eyes fixed on Douglas as he stood behind the rickety wooden podium, palms pressed to the peeling surface. His pulse throbbed in his ears, yet he forced himself to speak slowly and clearly. Every word mattered. Echo's life depended on it. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice echoing across the tense hush of the Grange Hall, I know many of you have concerns about my wolf, Echo, and the unfortunate calf attack. Let me start by saying I have witnesses who saw Echo on my property at the time of the incident. He wasn't anywhere near that calf. A faint murmur rippled through the crowd. Hannah stood a step behind him, gripping a folder that held signed statements from Miss Foster, Mr. Alvarez, and several others. She distributed copies to the commissioners seated at a long table up front. Her father, Mr. Cole, hovered near the wall with folded arms, his expression unreadable. Douglas gestured toward Miss Foster, who stepped forward, clearing her throat. I drove past Douglas's ranch around noon, same time folks say that calf was killed, she explained. I saw Echo in the yard, dozing. Now, I'm no expert on wolves, but it looked clear enough to me that he was staying put. One of the commissioners, a bespectacled woman in a crisp blouse, studied Ms. Foster's statement. Thank you, she said, then turned to the audience. Anyone else willing to testify? At her cue, Mr. Alvarez raised his hand and confirmed Ms. Mace Foster's account. Together, they painted a picture of Echo's docile behavior and unwavering presence on Douglas's land. Across the room, Warren Metzger leaned forward, pressing his lips into a tight line. He had purchased Douglas's goats just days before, clearly uncertain whether to stand in support or remain silent. In the end, he rose with a reluctant sigh. "I've done business with Forrester," he announced. "Don't see eye to eye on the wolf situation, but I know enough to say Echo's never crossed onto my acreage. I keep a close watch on my property line." A low hum of surprise spread through the crowd. Though Warren's words were hardly a ringing endorsement, they did challenge the notion that Echo was roaming the county preying on livestock. Douglas gave Warren a small nod of appreciation. Then Ryan and his associates stood. The subtle scowl on Ryan's face signaled he was prepared to mount a counterattack. "Commissioners," he began, stepping into the center aisle with a confident air. "We have heard from those who call themselves witnesses, but we also have local ranchers who suspect this wolf has been wandering near their fields for years, especially since no one else keeps a wolf around here." A couple of ranchers in the back row muttered in agreement. One older man with a weathered face stood up. "Wolves took 2 of my sheep last spring," he said. "Never saw which wolf did it, but I know it wasn't a dog. Who's to say it wasn't Echo?" The tension thickened. Hannah placed a calming hand on Douglas's shoulder, stepping forward. "With respect," she said, voice steadier than she felt. "Assuming one wolf is responsible for every livestock loss in this region is unfair. Countless predators roam these mountains. Why pin every incident on a single animal just because it's known by name?" Ryan's lips curled into a thin smile. "Fair point," he conceded, turning to address the commissioners. "But it's also naive. Predators that grow comfortable around humans can become emboldened, straying farther from the wild. A rancher raising a wolf is a recipe for conflict. More attacks are inevitable." He let his words hang in the air, stirring the fears of those already on edge. Soft murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. Hannah's gaze swept the room in desperation, finally landing on her father. To her surprise, Mr. Cole cleared his throat, stepping out of the shadows. "I'm no fan of wolves," he stated, voice echoing with quiet authority. "Lost my share of livestock to predators, but I've seen Echo these past few days with my daughter." He hesitated, as though the words were bitter on his tongue. "He hasn't shown a lick of aggression. If we're here for the truth, let's not condemn this animal without proof." A stir of surprise moved through the crowd. Hannah's father, a known predator skeptic, speaking in Echo's defense. Even Ryan looked taken aback. The commissioners exchanged glances. "Thank you, Mr. Cole," said the bespectacled commissioner. "We'll keep that in mind." She then turned to Ryan. "So unless you have concrete evidence tying Echo to the calf's death, we can't simply declare him guilty by association." Ryan's eyes flashed with something cold. He motioned to one of his associates, who handed him a folder. "There's more at stake here than one calf, Commissioner," he said smoothly. "Douglas Forrester is deeply in debt. The ranch is on the brink of foreclosure. His ability to manage a wolf or any farm animal should be questioned." He slid the documents toward the commissioners. "I've compiled public records showing overdue taxes and liens. Let's talk about responsibility." Douglas tensed, heart pounding. He knew his financial woes could overshadow the wolf's innocence. The commissioners flipped through the papers, frowns etched into their features. One cleared his throat. "Mr. Forrester, is this accurate?" Hannah reached for Douglas's hand, feeling the tremor in his grip. "I'm behind on taxes," he admitted. "I won't deny it, but I have a plan to pay down the debts. I sold some livestock recently, and I'm negotiating to restructure the loans. None of that changes the fact that Echo is innocent." Ryan took a step closer, voice dripping with concern. "But can a man struggling to keep his property afloat truly safeguard the community from a wolf?" A murmur spread through the hall. The commissioners exchanged uneasy looks. The older man among them tapped his pen on the table. "It's clear we have 2 intertwined issues: the wolf's alleged attack and the ranch's precarious finances. We need to decide if Echo poses a risk and whether Mr. Forrester's property status disqualifies him from harboring a wolf at all." A hush fell, the atmosphere charged with suspense. Douglas drew a shaky breath. They were walking a razor's edge. Echo's fate and the ranch's survival hinged on how the commissioners interpreted this tangled situation. Hannah glanced at Seth, the wildlife photographer, who had been quietly filming from the corner. Would his footage backfire? Or might it provide a lifeline? "Very well," the bespectacled commissioner said at last, setting aside the papers. "We'll recess for a short break and then reconvene. At that time, each side will present their final arguments and any last pieces of evidence. Then, we'll issue our recommendation to the county wildlife office." As people began filing toward the exit, the tension in the hall was thick enough to choke on. Outside, the sky had turned gray, threatening rain. It felt like nature itself was gathering for a final, decisive storm. Douglas's heart pounded with a mixture of dread and determination. They had only minutes to rally, to figure out how best to prove Echo's innocence, and to demonstrate that a debt-ridden rancher could still protect both his land and his beloved wolf. In the dark corners of the hall, Ryan's associates whispered among themselves, and Warren Metzger paced near the windows, face drawn in a grimace. Hannah's father stood stiffly by the door, arms folded. They were all poised for the final confrontation, each with an agenda as sharp as a blade. This was it, the last chance to save Echo from a forced removal or worse, and to save the ranch from the clutches of those who wanted it for themselves. The break would be brief, the next decision momentous. Standing at the threshold between hope and disaster, Douglas steeled himself. Everything boiled down to what they could say or prove when the meeting resumed. The countdown to the climax had truly begun. The heavy wooden doors of the Grange Hall slammed shut behind Douglas, Hannah, and their small group as they stepped outside for the brief recess. Clouds brooded overhead, the wind picking up to whip stray leaves across the parking lot. The tension felt almost electric, as if the very air vibrated with the weight of the impending decision. Echo wasn't present. He remained at home, waiting without understanding how precarious his fate had become. Douglas glanced around, seeking any sign of a last-minute break that might tip the scales in Echo's favor. Hannah clutched her folder of witness statements, knuckles white. Mr. Cole stood at her shoulder, arms crossed, the faint lines of worry etched into his brow. Nearby, Kyle was deep in whispered conversation with Miss Foster and Mr. Alvarez, reviewing the statements they planned to read aloud when the commissioners reconvened. On the far side of the parking lot, Ryan huddled with his associates beneath a wide oak tree, their voices low but urgent. Occasionally, one of them would angle a scathing look in Douglas's direction. Warren Metzger paced closer to the door, half listening to each side's arguments, his face reflecting the dilemma roiling inside him. He disliked wolves on principle, yet he also saw how precariously the community might unravel if big outside investors took over local lands. Seth, the wildlife photographer, hovered at the edge of the scene, camera strap looped around his neck. He had so far honored Hannah's request not to film or photograph anything too revealing, but he couldn't hide his fascination with the swirling drama. If we can show Echo isn't the culprit, it might be a powerful story of coexistence, he murmured, stepping up beside Douglas. Is there anything else we can do to confirm the true predator? Douglas clenched his teeth, scanning the anxious knots of people. We can't run tests on a whim, he said, voice thick with frustration. Most vets here aren't set up to do forensic work on livestock kills, and the official wildlife office can take weeks to respond. Hannah's phone buzzed in her pocket. Startled, she fished it out. It's the local vet, she said quickly, stepping aside to answer. Within moments, her expression shifted to a volatile mix of relief and dismay. Dr. Moreno took a quick look at the calf's remains. There's some evidence suggesting a smaller canine's bite, maybe a stray dog or a coyote, because the tooth spacing doesn't match a large wolf's jaw. That's something, Kyle exclaimed, hope lighting up his face. If we bring that to the commissioners, they'll have to realize Echo couldn't be responsible. But Hannah's hopeful smile faltered. It's not an official report yet. Dr. Moreno's only making an educated guess. And there's apparently a second vet who suspects the bite marks could still be from a wolf, just a younger or smaller one. It's inconclusive. A wave of frustration rippled through the group. They had a potential lifeline, yet it was too shaky to be definitive. Ryan's crowd would surely twist the uncertainty into more accusations. Hannah's father exhaled sharply, scanning the darkening sky. Inconclusive means neither side can prove a thing. That leaves it to emotion and suspicion. Folks are scared, especially if they think a wolf is lurking near their herds. Before anyone could respond, the Grange Hall doors opened, and a commissioner poked her head out. "We're back in session in 5 minutes," she announced. "Anyone who wants to speak should be ready." Douglas, Hannah, and the others exchanged tense looks. They had a half-baked bit of evidence that might sway a few minds, but no definitive proof. With a nod of resolution, Douglas marched forward, shoulders set. "Let's present everything we have, show them we're taking this seriously, and that the burden of proof rests on the accusers." They filed back into the hall, the atmosphere heavier than before. The commissioners had reconvened behind their table, the microphone angled expectantly. Ryan and his associates lined the opposite side of the aisle, wearing carefully neutral expressions. Warren Metzger settled uneasily in the middle row, arms folded across his broad chest. Seth stayed near the back, camera at the ready but angled down, respecting his word not to stoke the flames prematurely. The bespectacled commissioner signaled for quiet, scanning the faces around her. "We'll now hear final statements. Anyone wishing to speak in defense of the wolf or presenting new information, please come forward." Hannah stepped up, her folder in hand. She took a trembling breath, eyes darting to her father for a flicker of reassurance. "We've just received word from Dr. Moreno," she began, voice resonating despite her nerves. "While the findings are preliminary, they suggest the calf's injuries may not match a large wolf's bite. This is far from conclusive, but it points to another predator, perhaps a dog or coyote." She held up the phone, screen glowing with the vet's text summary. Ryan smirked, leaning over to whisper something to his associate. Then he rose, striding to the front like a seasoned performer. "Commissioners, we respect the efforts made by Dr. Moreno. However, you'll see in this statement from another licensed veterinarian." He tapped a printed page on the table, an opinion that a wolf could produce such injuries if it were younger or not full-sized. "Since we don't know Echo's age or exact background, we can't rule him out." A restless stir swept the hall. Douglas caught Mrs. Foster's pleading gaze, urging him to speak. He crossed to the microphone, unclenching his fists with difficulty. "Echo has lived on my ranch for over 5 years," he said. "He's fully grown and has never attacked livestock. We have multiple neighbors vouching. He was on the property at the time of the calf's death. And more importantly, there's a long history of responsible coexistence on my family's land. These are facts." He placed the ledger, highlighting his father's history of wolf conservation, on the commissioner's table. "We're not ignoring the risk predators can pose, but the solution isn't fear-mongering or forcing me off my land. I'm prepared to work with local authorities, set up better fencing, do whatever it takes." Ryan watched, eyes gleaming. "And what about your debts, Mr. Forrester? The county can't just ignore the possibility that you lack the resources to manage a wolf safely, or manage your property at all." Heat flared in Douglas's cheeks. "I'm restructuring my debts. This is my home. I won't let it fall into the hands of people who might turn it into a hunting ground or exploit it for profit." Murmurs rose again, a mix of empathy and skepticism. The older commissioner cleared his throat. "We've heard both sides now. It's time for the commissioners to deliberate. We'll ask all parties to wait outside while we discuss. Our decision, recommendation actually, will influence the County Wildlife Office's final action." A subdued hush followed as the commissioners stood and filed into a back room. Ryan and his group retreated to one side, huddling in whispered conversation. Hannah reached for Douglas's hand, her eyes brimming with worry. Kyle patted them both on the back, while Mr. Cole kept a stony vigil. They had laid out every scrap of evidence, every statement. Echo's future and the fate of Douglas's ancestral ranch now hung on the commissioner's verdict. Outside the windows, thunderheads gathered, and the wind rattled loose shutters. Nature itself seemed to echo the crowd's apprehension. Ominous, swirling, loaded with anticipation. All that remained was the final ruling. In minutes, everything could change forever. A crack of thunder rattled the old Grange Hall's windows, causing several people in the crowd to jump. Douglas stood with Hannah, Kyle, and Mr. Cole near the building's side exit, waiting anxiously for the commissioners to return from their deliberation. The atmosphere felt stifling, charged with the combined tension of neighbors, ranchers, and outsiders, who all sensed that a pivotal decision was mere moments away. Ryan and his associates had congregated near the hallway leading to the back room where the commissioners met. They seemed strangely calm, almost smug. Warren Metzger stood by the exit, eyes downcast, his posture reflecting an inner battle he couldn't quite shake. Seth, the wildlife photographer, hovered on the periphery, camera in hand but discreetly pointed toward the floor. A hush of dread and anticipation settled over everyone. Minutes ticked by in slow motion. Hannah twisted her phone in her hands, waiting for any update from Dr. Moreno or another vet. Some last-minute break that would lend Echo an ironclad alibi. Douglas considered a final plea to the commissioners, but the guard at the door shook his head. "They'll be out any second," he warned. "Best let them finish." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the hall through streaked windows. The storm mirrored the clash of wills inside, a swirl of fear, anger, and unwavering hope. Then, at last, the commissioners filed out. The bespectacled woman in the crisp blouse took her seat at the makeshift table, gesturing for everyone to quiet down. The hush became absolute as she cleared her throat. "We've considered all testimony, evidence, and statements," she began, scanning the rows of anxious faces. "It's clear there's no definitive proof linking Mr. Forrester's wolf, Echo, to the recent calf attack. At the same time, we acknowledge the concerns about Mr. Forrester's financial stability and the potential threat a large predator might pose if it roams freely. After discussing, She paused, her gaze flicking behind Douglas to the entrance. The door burst open with a sharp creak, and a rain-soaked figure stumbled in, gasping for breath. It was a local teen named Jace, known around town for helping neighbors with small chores. He held a smartphone in his trembling hand. Water dripped from his hooded jacket onto the worn floor. Sorry, Jace panted. "I came as fast as I could." He looked at the commissioners with wide, urgent eyes. "You need to see this." The commissioners exchanged surprised glances, and one of them waved Jace forward. He hurried to the table, fumbling with the phone as he angled its screen for them. Anxious murmurs rippled through the crowd. Hannah edged closer, her heart pounding so fiercely she feared everyone could hear it. "It's video," Jace explained, voice still unsteady. "From a security camera we set up because we had trouble with strays near our chicken coop." He glanced at Douglas. "I heard about the calf being attacked and folks blaming a wolf. But this, well, it shows something else entirely." One commissioner pressed play, eyes narrowing as the footage played silently. The other commissioners leaned in, and an immediate stir of shock crossed their faces. Ryan and his associates craned their necks to see. Warren Metzger abandoned his pacing to step closer, brow furrowed. After a tense few seconds, the bespectacled commissioner turned the phone around so everyone could view it. The grainy video displayed a fenced pasture under moonlight. A calf moved at the frame's edge. Then a dark shape darted in, small, lean, and swift. Not a full-grown wolf. The telltale bushy tail and pointed muzzle revealed it to be a coyote, or possibly a stray dog. The calf reacted too slowly, and the predator lunged for its hind leg. As the calf struggled, the camera feed shook, but it clearly showed a single attacker, nothing resembling Echo's larger, distinct form. Eventually, the predator spooked and fled when a light flickered in the farmhouse window. A collective gasp swept the room. Jace paused the video, face flushed from rushing and from the weight of what he was revealing. "I found this today when I got home," he said, voice cracking. "I realized it had to be the same time that calf got attacked not far from our place. My folks said I had to bring it here right away." Commissioners huddled again, exchanging urgent whispers. Ryan and his group looked thunderstruck. One of them tried to speak, but words failed him as the footage looped, showing again the smaller predator's shape. Hannah pressed a shaking hand to her mouth, tears pricking her eyes. This was it. The undeniable proof Echo had nothing to do with the calf's death. Relief cascaded through Douglas like a tidal wave, and he squeezed Hannah's other hand, his chest tight with gratitude. The lead commissioner cleared her throat, bringing the hall back to order. Her voice carried a tone of resolution. Based on this newly presented evidence, it appears the calf was attacked by a stray canine or coyote, not a full-grown wolf. That invalidates the primary claim against Echo. We therefore see no justification for forced removal of Mr. Forrester's animal on grounds of livestock endangerment. A moment of stunned silence overtook the crowd. Then Miss Foster cheered softly, while Mr. Alvarez let out a whoop. Hannah's father, Mr. Cole, closed his eyes, exhaling as though some hidden knot of tension finally unwound. Warren Metzger, arms still folded, gave a slow nod, conceding the point with visible reluctance, but also a hint of respect. Ryan, meanwhile, stiffened, stepping forward. "What about the debts?" he demanded, voice taut with frustration. "That wolf is still a liability if Forrester can't maintain proper fencing or upkeep." The commissioner's gaze turned cool. "Mr. Forrester's financial situation remains a separate matter," she said firmly. "We recommend he works with the county to set up a payment plan or find a solution. That, however, does not give anyone license to confiscate or harm the wolf without evidence of aggression. Unless there's another legitimate complaint, Echo will stay where he is." Ryan looked like he wanted to argue, but the commissioners were already rising from their seats, adjourning the meeting. Warren gave Douglas a measured look before striding out, his footsteps echoing in the quiet hall. Ryan's associates whispered furiously among themselves, likely plotting new tactics, but for now, the immediate threat had passed. At the center of it all, Douglas stood trembling. Joy, relief, and fatigue crashed over him in equal measure. Hannah wrapped her arms around him, and he pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat thud against his own racing pulse. Kyle clapped him on the shoulder, unable to hide a broad grin. "We did it," Hannah whispered, eyes glistening. "Echo's safe, at least for now." Douglas nodded, tears threatening to spill. The final battle for the ranch's finances still loomed, but Echo's innocence was vindicated in front of the entire community. For 5 years, the wolf had waited unwaveringly for Douglas's return, and now, at the brink of disaster, fate, or providence, had delivered salvation in the form of one determined teenager and a security camera. Seth quietly snapped a single photo of the group's tearful embrace, an image that captured a rare, triumphant moment of man and community in harmony with the natural world. Outside, the storm raged, but inside Douglas's heart, a fragile hope blossomed. The next steps would be challenging, facing Ryan's legal maneuvers, tackling the debts, but at least now Echo's place by Douglas's side was secure, and that, for the moment, felt like a victory worth everything they'd endured. A day later, the rain finally subsided, leaving the ranch enveloped in a fresh, clean scent of damp earth and renewed possibilities. Thin tendrils of morning fog curled around the battered fence posts, and birds chirped tentatively as though testing the air for signs of calm. In the distance, Echo stood at the far edge of the property near a patch of tall grass, his keen amber eyes scanning the horizon. Each breath of cool post-storm wind carried with it a sense of a new beginning, a subtle promise that they had turned a corner. Inside the farmhouse, Douglas placed the kettle on the restored, slightly rusted stove. Water began to simmer, and the soft hum of heat rose through the quiet kitchen. Hannah, yawning from a night of fitful rest, joined him. Their eyes met, and in that simple glance lay the unspoken understanding of how far they'd come. The day before, they had faced the real possibility of losing not only the ranch but also Echo, the wolf who had become a steadfast emblem of loyalty in both their lives. "I could hardly sleep," Hannah admitted, rubbing her arms for warmth. "Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see the Grange Hall, the commissioners, and Ryan's smug face." A faint tremor crossed her lips, half relief and half residual tension. "But it's over. At least this battle is." Douglas gave a small, bittersweet smile as he spooned coffee grounds into a mug. "We won the fight for Echo, but we still have to solve the debts. Ryan and his associates might not be finished. They'll look for another angle to take over the land. It's not like they're going to give up just because we proved Echo's innocence." Hannah nodded. "I know," she said, casting a glance toward the window. From behind the glass, she saw Echo's silhouette, He had shifted his stance, ears perked, nose twitching. Every so often, he'd pause to sniff the air, as though reaffirming that he belonged here and that the people he trusted were safe. Moments later, Kyle stepped in from the porch, his boots leaving damp footprints on the old floorboards. "Place is quiet this morning," he commented, shedding his jacket. "I checked the perimeter fence. No sign of trouble. Ms. Foster dropped by too. She wants to organize a get-together of local folks who support you, a kind of potluck to show solidarity. Could be good PR." "That's a generous offer," Douglas replied, his thoughts whirling with how best to keep the momentum going. "If we can rally the community, maybe I can negotiate a longer grace period for the taxes, show the county that the ranch is still a vital part of this area." The kettle began to whistle, cutting through the hush. Hannah poured the steaming water over the coffee grounds, an earthy aroma filling the kitchen. She passed a mug to Kyle and one to Douglas, then paused. "Where's my father?" she asked, glancing around. "Went out to check the barn," Kyle explained, blowing on his coffee. "He's been surprisingly cooperative since the meeting. I guess seeing the footage of that smaller predator took a load off his mind. He knows Echo isn't the threat he feared." Douglas sipped his coffee, the warmth settling over him. It means a lot that he stood up for Echo, even when he had doubts. He remembered the hush in the Grange Hall after Mr. Cole's guarded defense of Echo, and how that simple statement had given their argument more credibility. Sometimes the hardest hearts shifted when confronted with the truth. With the morning chores finished, they ventured outside. The sky, still clouded but slightly brighter, spread above them like a quiet blessing. Echo trotted over, his bushy tail swaying gently, and nudged Douglas's hand with his muzzle. Instinctively, Douglas scratched behind Echo's ears, the contact a soothing reminder of what they had almost lost. Hannah's father emerged from the barn, dust on his shoulders. He paused, leaning against the old wooden door. "The land's still good," he remarked, half to himself. "You got a fighting chance if you can just hold off those vultures looking to snatch it away?" Douglas nodded appreciatively. "Thanks," he said, "for everything. I know you and Hannah haven't always agreed on the wolves or how to handle predators, but—" Mr. Cole cut him off with a raised hand. "I still worry," he admitted, gaze drifting to Echo. "But seeing how that wolf waited all those years, how he never harmed a soul, well, maybe I've been too quick to judge." His eyes flicked back to Douglas, a grudging respect there. "If you need help shoring up the place, let me know. I'm not made of money, but I've got hands and time." It was more of a truce than a grand gesture of reconciliation, but Hannah's face lit up at her father's words. To her, it felt like a genuine step forward, proof that trust could grow when given the right conditions. Their conversation was interrupted by the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. A familiar pickup pulled in, Warren Metzger's. He climbed out slowly, offering a nod in greeting, then produced a folded newspaper from under his arm. "Morning," he said, his voice subdued. He handed Douglas the paper, opened to a local article, "Commissioners clear wolf of blame in calf incident." Douglas scanned the headline, relief washing over him again. Word was spreading fast. "I appreciate you telling the truth at the meeting," he said, voice sincere. Warren shrugged, as though uncomfortable with praise. Didn't like the idea of an innocent animal getting pinned for something he didn't do. He paused, glancing at Echo, who watched him with measured curiosity. "Still not a fan of wolves, but if you say he's contained and not out roaming, I guess I can live with that." A crackle of distant thunder rumbled in the hills beyond the farm, a reminder that storms would always loom, literal or metaphorical. Yet the tension had less of a sting now, as though the ranch and its inhabitants had weathered the worst of the gale. They all looked at the horizon together. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel like a steady slide into hopelessness. Instead, it felt like a promise, fragile but honest. Echo shifted beside Douglas, the wolf's presence a living testament to patience, loyalty, and second chances. In 5 years of waiting, he'd taught them all an unspoken lesson, that faith and devotion could bridge even the widest chasms of time and adversity. And now, as the clouds began to part and the farmland glistened with rain-soaked renewal, Echo was no longer waiting alone. Thank you for being part of Echo's journey with us. If this story of unwavering loyalty and hope in the face of adversity moved you, Please subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt tales. Don't forget to like this video and share it with friends who believe in the power of second chances. Stick around for our next video, where we'll explore more stories that celebrate resilience, courage, and the unbreakable bonds we form with the world around us. Until then, remember, sometimes just when it seems all is lost, a new dawn breaks, bringing with it the promise of a brighter tomorrow.